Welcome back to Kings of the North. Doug Lesmerises and Bill Landis. Landis, so many things happening because we certainly are not the only people making this comparison. But for college football, comparing it to the NFL, it's like if the NFL had its draft, free agency, and the playoffs going on at the same time, which is what we do in our sport for some reason, because National Signing Day is tomorrow.
It's great. It's great, right? You see guys on teams that are highly likely to be in the playoff announcing they're transferring, because what else are they supposed to do with the calendar that college football has created?
Yeah. So it's not great. We understand it's not great. There are complications with class schedules and semesters, and we understand that. It's currently in a worst of all possible worlds. And the idea that if you're not worried about the playoff at all, you can be maybe flying around, right, and making visits. But if you're prepared, it's a little preposterous. But the bottom line is that National Signing Day is Wednesday, and we will cover live some of the things that are happening on the Wednesday show. But a lot of the hay's in the barn, right, Landis? So we're going to sort of reset where things are, particularly from a Northern versus Southern recruiting perspective, which we feel like nobody else quite does it like us because nobody frames it quite like us. So that's okay. We're not telling you we have inside information on what the number 88 player in the country is going to do tomorrow, but we have what we think the North should be doing in recruiting, right?
Yeah, I think we have thoughts on like strategy and what results should be. Less so did Johnny enjoy his visit to school X and might he flip?
Yeah. And did Johnny enjoy his visit? Now that sounds like a what? Did Johnny enjoy? That's a heavy snare. Did Johnny enjoy his visit? Did Texas A&M make a pitch?
It's a Gordon Lightfoot song.
He wrote about ships sinking in Great Lakes and official visits in the SEC. Top 300 players by the 247 composite rankings. We just go on their list. You can go. Everybody can go on the list, right? It's a free list. How about what a service to the world, these recruiting sites. How about that? Just free. Look at the list. I'd pay $4,000 a year to look at the list, but thank you for making it free. Don't tell them I said that. By my numbers, this is players who are committed to the South, players who are committed to the North, players who are committed to border schools, and players who are uncommitted. Also, to reset, I have to make sure I check myself on this because I'm worried that I change my own parameters sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
We have 28 Northern Power 4 teams that we talk about, right? There's 68 power conference teams. So that means there's 40 others. For this exercise, I had 33 Southern teams and 7 border schools, but I can't remember what I do with Missouri all the time. Do I consider Missouri a border school or a Southern school?
I think Southern because they're in the SEC, right? Same as Kentucky.
But now we get into latitude too. A lot of people want us to have Missouri. For this exercise, I counted Missouri as a border school. Otherwise, I think the California border schools / border schools are set. USC, UCLA, Cal, Stanford, Louisville, and Virginia Tech.
I think you should count Missouri as whatever helps the agenda on that particular day.
Cheers to that, brother. That's kind of what I was hoping you would say. All right, so they're a border school. We're not counting them for the South. These are by those standards. So again, the bottom line is there's 5 more Southern schools than there are Northern schools, right? But the Southern edge is slightly more than it's like, well, they have 5 more schools. That's why they have 100 more players. 183 for the South, 82 for the North, 17 for those 7 California border schools, 18 uncommitted players. This Wednesday is Southern Super Bowl day.
Mm-hmm.
We still will give this day to them, right? This day still belongs to them, but we'll see you on January 20th, and we'll see you on December 20th and December 21st. Those days now belong to all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But the first Wednesday in December, we're not going to pretend. But the thing that we remind people the other 364 days of the year is that recruiting is not quite the be-all, end-all that it once was when it comes to actually succeeding on the football field because of the transfer portal, because of development. But 183 to 82, Landis, is what are you going to do?
Yeah, I mean, geography is what it is, right? And until there are more very good high school football players, and there are excellent high school football players in the North. I do think there is a bit of confirmation bias that goes into this sometimes that leads people to rank Southern players higher than Northern players.
Yes.
I'm not saying that's true across the board, but I think that's a reality. But nonetheless, there are a lot of very talented high school football players in the South, and more so than there are in the North. So that as long as that remains the same, this number will always be a bit wonky.
So then let's do this. I didn't do it for the top 300, but I did it for the top 100. Okay, the top 100 players in the 24/7 rankings this year. At the moment, 59 South, 27 North, 4 border, 10 uncommitted. Okay. 2022, it was 74 South, 20 North, 6 border. 2019, it was 67 South, 29 North, 4 border. So it's not necessarily trending the same way. But compared to 2022, the North has 7 more guys this year than they did 3 years ago. Now, they also at the moment have 2 fewer than they did 6 years ago. But if they get a couple of kind of uncommitted guys, they'll be in the same range there. So we have to also understand what the baseline was. And if the North is making progress, if they were getting only 20% of the top 100, and now they're getting closer to 30% of the top 100, that is a little reflective of, okay, NIL, the North can compete like that. That's the thing I think matters, Landis, is where the sport was before NIL, from a recruiting standpoint, is the North now doing better than it did? I think that is the number one question for Northern recruiting.
It is, yeah. It's can people can programs kind of rise up and help Ohio State basically bring more of that caliber of player to the North? And I think that has happened. If you look at Oregon is the best example of that, but Notre Dame has upped its game. I think Penn State's upped its game. I think Michigan, especially in this cycle, has upped its game. And then you'll also just see like Colorado, like the couple of guys they've gotten, and you'll see like one-offs too at programs you just never sort of expected, whether that's like a Syracuse or Nebraska or Wisconsin. Like, do they have the NIL arsenals to fill their class with guys like this? No, but they have enough to pluck 1 or 2 that helps that raise that number as well.
Yeah. So we can't say that NIL and the portal are evening things out, and especially NIL because the South used to cheat more than the North, and now everybody can pay, and then look at the recruiting rankings and be like, oh, nothing changed, right? That would be unacceptable to us. That, okay, if you gave, because listen, we understand the number one thing about this is where are the best players, and that always is going to be a Southern lean. But I certainly have pushed the idea that, well, one of the reasons the SEC had a recruiting edge was that they cheated more. So if that's not happening anymore, then like that excuse is out the door. And I do think I don't know that it's an excuse, but I think Northern schools also thought that in previous days. Like, that's one of the reasons we're not competing there. So when that's gone, it's like, okay, that's gone. Now let's see what's up. Show us. Prove it.
Yeah.
Activate your NIL. Get that money rolling, the corporate money and the donor money. And what Wetzel talks about every Tuesday, they've got all these billionaires up here. Go get some players with that money. And if that doesn't happen, then it's just there's more good players down there. And the South, on an even playing field, is better at it. And we would have to acknowledge that.
I acknowledge it because I think part of it, like if the SEC cheats in recruiting, like talking point, like I think we're all smart enough to know that there is some truth to that. But I don't think the lack of that happening up north was because they didn't want to do it. I think it's because they didn't know how to do it. And there wasn't the mechanisms for doing it that existed in the South and have existed in the South for a long time. And even if as you watched NIL continue to develop, like there have been schools in the North that I think have been a little slower to get their arms around that, including a program like Ohio State. But they seem to have figured it out, and others have started to figure it out too. So it is a little more even. It's never going to be totally even because of where the players are, but I do think it does level it out significantly.
So can we do 5 minutes on does recruiting matter?
Sure. Well, yeah.
Of-
I mean, it
So
matters. Yes, of course it does.
here's of course it matters, but here's like the proof. There's a particular thing that I think makes the point. Obviously, recruiting matters. So the North in the 2022 class only got 20 of the top 100 guys. Okay. I looked at what those 20 guys did for their Northern teams.
Mm-hmm.
So in this season, I would say 10 of those 20 were helping their teams win. 5 of them were around, but maybe not super directly important to winning just because of playing time, and 5 had transferred. So like a 50% hit rate on top 100 players. Does that sound about right to you? I mean, I think a lot of times, right, with recruiting, people think like a third really help you, a third provide depth, and a third kind of don't do much.
What was Urban Meyer's thing? 10-80-10, right?
Yeah. Explain
10%
that.
Of your 10% of your class has to become like superstars, like totally max out their capabilities. 80%, I think, have to be at least serviceable players, if not starters, but like reliable depth, develop over the course of years, like on that track record. And then the bottom 10% is just like guys who wash out of the program. There's some accepted loss there.
So let's run through the guys, like the proof of why recruiting matters for Northern teams. Okay. A guy who doesn't count on the list was the guy who was the number 1 recruit in that country who's going to win the Heisman Trophy for the North this year, which is Travis Hunter, who went to Jackson State and then followed Deion Sanders. So he's not one of the 20, but boy, oh boy, is he a nice advertisement for recruiting matters, isn't he?
He is. Yeah. That one turned out okay.
That is as good of a direct line. I mean, now it makes me want to go back. It's not like we haven't had great players. We haven't had like the best recruit in a class become a great player before. It does happen. He might be as direct of a line as we've ever had. He's the best guy. It was a huge deal when he went to Jackson State instead of Florida State. It was like, wow, he's going to play at that lower level school. He was really good there. And then when he transferred to an FBS school, he was as good as anybody in the country. It's like, okay, that is being supremely talented and getting everything you can out of it.
I think we're on a pretty good run of number 1 guys
really
panning out. I feel like Travis Hunter, I'm trying to remember, like Caleb Williams, Trevor Lawrence.
True. Yeah, no, you're right. Okay. So the next, the top guy who actually signed in the North that year was CJ Hicks at Ohio State, who's a linebacker who has a situational role on that defense, but in year 3 is not a starter. So I put him in he's still on the roster, but he's not really making a huge contribution to winning. Is that fair?
Fair, yep.
But now get ready for this. Sonny Styles at linebacker for Ohio State, absolutely contributing to winning for them. Will Johnson at Michigan helped them win a national title last year, and when he was healthy this year, was arguably Michigan's best player, is going to be a first-round pick. Absolutely fits that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Here's a huge one. Josh Connerly, the left tackle for Oregon. 5-star guy they got from Southern California. Huge for Oregon.
Yeah, started right away.
And now this is like the proof is in the pudding. The next 3 guys are Penn State guys, and if Penn State didn't have these guys, they wouldn't be a playoff team. Denai Dennis Sutton on the defensive line, Nick Singleton at running back, Drew Aller at quarterback. And for Penn State to finally get that sort of borderline 5-star quarterback, felt like it changed the program in the moment. Drew Aller's not the best quarterback in the country, but he is incredibly important to their success, as are Denai Dennis Sutton and Nick Singleton. And I think if we sit here right now and say, like, what would you hope a class would bring to you? This is why you get out there and try to get guys. Now, that was Singleton and Denai Dennis Sutton are both from Pennsylvania, right? And Aller's from Ohio. So, but this is also keeping guys home like this. But this is why you do it. So for the people who sometimes say like, oh, recruiting's overrated, James Franklin and his staff are staring at something like this and saying like, we need to keep doing this because look at what this did for our team.
Yeah, he's doesn't meet the threshold here, but Abdul Carter was in that class too. 2022 recruiting class for Penn State.
And a good player, like maybe not a top 100 recruit, but a very important recruit for them.
Yeah, no, that's why it'll always matter. Like I don't recruiting will never stop mattering, which is like of course I feels like even a silly thing to say, but you just have more opportunities now to make up for your mistakes via the transfer portal. But you still have to go out there and get good high school players and develop them for a number of years, because if you don't do that and you're just relying on turning over your roster via the portal every year, you're going to encounter some missteps along the way. And certainly you can encounter them via high school recruiting too, but you kind of get more swings and more time to iron that out than you would if you were just doing it in the portal every year.
It's no longer the only way, but it is still a very good way. It is still the best way to try to do it.
I think
so. Those are 6 guys. Derek Moore, edge guy for Michigan, very much was important to them winning. Wasn't a starter last year, but was a good player and was a starter this year, right? He absolutely qualifies. Xavier Wampa at safety for Iowa, starter all year. Maybe has not been like an All-American caliber safety, but a very good player, right? He definitely qualifies, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Joe Bruner, the starting left guard for Wisconsin this year, was a top 100 recruit in that class. He qualifies. And then Lander Barton at linebacker from Utah was just inside the top 100 there. He led Utah in defensive snaps and tackles this season. And so has absolutely done and has been a really good player for them for 3 years. So that's 10 out of 20. Now, a couple, like Ohio State has a bunch of guys in there who kind of have not made huge contributions or transferred. Amari Abor transferred, Caleb Brown transferred, Keon Gray's transferred, right? There's a bunch of, so like a lot of the misses, quote, misses in there are Ohio State misses. Dasan McCullough, it's funny, like Dasan McCullough was a huge top 100 recruit for Indiana that year at linebacker because his dad was on the staff, and then his dad left to go coach at Notre Dame, and then he transferred to Oklahoma, and Indiana made the playoff this year without its highest ranked recruit from the class 3 years ago. And typically your third year guys are your drivers for success. And it was like, okay, this is like a prime example of like, okay, well, there's other paths now. Can you imagine if Dasan McCullough was there and had lived up to like, hey, like, by the way, here comes Kurt Signetti, but we have a 4.5 star in the middle of our defense also. That would have been awesome.
You want to put Dasan McCullough on the other end of the line opposite Mikal Kamara and see what happens.
You know what I mean? Like it would have been crazy. So I just wanted to like remind people, Jalen Sneed at Notre Dame is like a top 50 guy who's been like a solid defensive player for them, was 13th in defensive snaps for them. He didn't quite make the threshold for me, but he's there. He's helping them, right? So anyway, it's just a reminder of like, it's not everything, but it really is helpful. It really can be a thing. And I think like, I just think that Penn State example, that's the kind of thing, because it's not, Penn State had done that before, but they didn't quite maybe have 3 top 30 national guys in every single class, right? But that's something that all these teams in the North who want to be at that level would point to something like that. And it starts with keeping guys home, and it really matters if you have a quarterback in that group. So I wanted to tell people recruiting mattered.
Famously, people don't know that enough. We should do a series in the offseason on like Northern recruiting classes that hit the most.
Northern, I like it. Because there are some that, there are some that really stand out. That's a good idea. I like when we plan the show during the show. I actually mean that. I think it's nice to have the people involved. Hey, that's a good idea. All right. Let's run through very quickly. This is just to touch on everybody. And again, it's for our 28 Northern teams. So you have a little bit of context of these are the teams that we talk about all the time and maybe otherwise don't get compared to each other, where these schools rank in terms of their recruiting classes right now. We know there are flips that could come. There are some guys who are not going to sign on Wednesday. Everything's not done. But as of last night, when I was putting this list together, this is where things stood. Ohio State has the number 1 recruiting class. This is by the 247 composite ratings. Ohio State has the number 1 recruiting class in the North. They're 3rd in the nation. Oregon's 2nd in the North. That's 7th in the nation. And I don't know what would change that, Bill, but should that be the expectation that Ohio State and Oregon are just going to be the best recruiting teams in the North for at least the near future?
Yeah, I think this list, at least the top 5, I think they're going to be there more often than not. But the Ohio State and Oregon almost always at the top.
Michigan is 3rd, 8th in the nation. Notre Dame 4th, 12th in the nation. Penn State 5th, 18th in the nation. That's your top 5. Would be a very big deal for another school to break into that.
Yeah, I think it would. I mean, I don't even know who'd have a realistic shot, to be honest. But yes, it would be a huge deal if it ever happened.
So And this is a reminder. And again, we understand what the deal is here. And again, we maybe thought this was going to be the deal with the whole show when we came up with the idea of the show, where we were doing things like, wow, congratulations to Penn State for being 5th in the North. That is awesome. Now they're 18th in the country, but they're 5th in the North. That we were going to be constantly recontextualizing things because the South was just better.
Mm-hmm.
So this is maybe if the North had not risen up, what we're doing today maybe would have been what we were doing all year, where we were saying congrats on being 4th when actually you're 12th. That's Notre Dame. But instead, Bill, we only have to do it today and tomorrow. That's it. It's the only time we're doing it.
That's right. We can even do it the other way, though. You want to do average player rating and not just overall class score. Oregon's first.
Oregon's first? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll take that.
Oregon's first, Ohio State's 5th, Michigan's 6th.
Nice. Look at that. Because they're discerning. We're more discerning here in the North.
That's
is that
right.
part of the point too?
That is.
Although it's one, I think
quality
there's
over quantity.
I think both matter because quantity also matters too. But also there also was a time when the Big Ten had a rule and was much more strict about it. Like, hey, no more than 25 people in your class. Make sure you're down to 85 scholarships by the time preseason camp is starting. And the South was just like, 33 in our class this year. And then when you would only look at overall class ratings, it was like everybody in the SEC had 31 and 33 and 34, and everybody in the Big Ten had 22 and 23 and 25. And it was like raw numbers, quantity, the Big Ten couldn't keep up. And that's when average star rating really mattered.
Yeah, I mean,
I think it's not quite as much of a disparity anymore as it was 6 years ago. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think it's an automatic plus to have like 15 guys in your class but have the highest average player rating, right? Like Oregon's number 1 right now, but they only have 17 commits. They'll get more. They'll be in the 20s. But like Georgia has 28 commits. Georgia has 11 more players in its class right now than Oregon does. And that's like Ohio State has done this a lot where like it's never quite gotten the number 1 class by the total points, but it has been kind of right there via player average, but also has only signed like 21 guys. And then you get 2 years down the road and you're like, I can't believe you only signed 21 guys in that class. Right. So the quantity does matter, to your point. It's not always a quality conversation.
But also, I think this is the point. The quantity is where the portal matters. Because previously, when, hey, we got 28 guys in our class and we're going to eat up a bunch of guys who are going to be stuck on our second team in perpetuity, but we kept them away from somebody else. Your quantity, if it is quality, is going to transfer. Or let me say it this way. Your quantity is going to transfer. If the quantity is quality, it will matter.
Yeah.
Because other schools are going to end up with those guys because you're not going to keep them. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, if your third string wide receiver can go to another school and be a starter, that's when the portal really matters, which is why size in the South doesn't matter. Motion in the ocean. Number 6 is Washington. Number 7 is Wisconsin. Number 8 is Nebraska. Number 9 is Maryland. All those schools are in the top 25 nationally. And this is one of those where it's like the North starts to really make sense. Like in the 20s, it's like the North owns the 20s in recruiting rankings, right? Yeah. Washington, I think, is one of those teams that would like to maybe peek up into that top 5 in the North occasionally. Mm-hmm. I think Nebraska would have aims on that too, if they really get it together. Now, Nebraska did just sign Dana Holgorsen to a full 2-year deal today, and they also have officially lost Tony White, the defensive coordinator, to Florida State. So like that's like 2 coordinator changes from where Nebraska was at the start of this season. They chose to get rid of the offensive coordinator, the defensive coordinator left. Like, you've got to get stuff nailed down. But I think Nebraska, don't you think there could be years where Nebraska out recruits Notre Dame or Penn State or Michigan?
I think it'd be really tough. Just maybe because I think NIL makes it far more likely, but I still think I'd be surprised if they pulled that off.
So number 9 was Maryland. Number 10 is Rutgers, 26 nationally. Number 11, Colorado, 12, Syracuse, 13, Kansas State, 14, Indiana, 15, Minnesota. Colorado's interesting, is it not, if Deion Sanders sticks around for some period of time? Because they're making some hay. Again, not with, I don't know that they'll never have the quantity in their class, but they might pull a decent number of like top 250 kids and then fill out the rest of their team with portal stuff. And that really could work. I'm curious if he's around, what they could do.
I'm curious what the classes will look like. They signed 12 high school kids last year. They're at 15 right now. I think with designs on adding a couple of more. Their player average in their high school recruiting is actually lower right now than it was last year.
Okay.
But I'm okay with that because it's like a point lower. It's a point and a half lower, but they're signing more kids. I just think I do think they need to bring in more high school players. Like I don't have any problem with going after the portal the way that Deion does and will this offseason. But I like the fact that they seem to be more interested in bringing in a few more high school kids.
I do think Syracuse at 12th in the North and 35th in the nation is pretty good. That's Fran Brown getting some stuff done, is it not?
Yeah, I think that's about where they were last year with, like, I don't even count that necessarily as Fran's first class. That was kind of a bridge class, but to sustain like being in the mid 30s back-to-back years when I think they were like in the 50s the year before that is pretty good. Yeah. Because they'll portal shop too.
16 is Iowa in the North, 17 is Illinois, 18 West Virginia, 19 Utah, 20 Pitt. All of them are in the 40s nationally. Could Illinois start getting a little more done there? That's one of those, if you start maybe getting a couple of Chicago kids to go to Illinois.
Yeah.
I wonder.
Yeah.
I'll be like a 9-3 year, right? Like this is, and a 9-3 year that maybe isn't, maybe you don't see that in this class, but I wonder if it really feels like Brett Bielema is building something there. How much ground they could make up in the Midwest.
Yeah, they might need another 9-3 type year for people to really buy in, because they took a step back last year. Obviously, this is a great bounce back. I do think if Illinois can get some more inroads into Chicago, then yes, there's a step forward to take there.
Number 18 in the North is West Virginia, 47th nationally. 19 is Utah, 20 is Pitt. So those are our 20 Northern teams who are in the top 50 nationally. 21 is Boston College. 22 BYU, 23 Iowa State, 24 Kansas, 25 Northwestern, 26 Michigan State, 27 Cincinnati, and no surprise, Purdue is last. And Purdue has the 100th ranked class in the country right now, and they're losing guys like every day. So they are going to be about as rock bottom as you can be as a Power 4 team with where they are on the field and where they are in recruiting and roster building right now. They tried to hit the portal this past offseason, and it didn't really work. They're going to have to build a team out of the portal again, Landis, are they not?
Yeah, they'll definitely have to. We'll see whenever they name a new head coach what's left over in the second signing day for Purdue to go after, but it's going to be a heavy portal makeover. And I thought they got some good players in the portal last year.
So did I.
Some of them didn't hit, some of them got hurt. Like, it just never really came together. But that's going to be a portal flip for sure.
And then Michigan State at 26th in the North and 61st nationally. There were times when like Michigan State had it going. Michigan State could have a top 25 national recruiting class. This is Jonathan Smith. They hired some Midwestern guys, try to make inroads there. Again, I think like culturally going from Oregon State to Michigan State made a lot of sense, but he certainly did not have many recruiting connections in the Midwest. It's not the be all end all, but that's a little low for Michigan State.
It's not what you want to see from a first-year staff, right? Even though Michigan State's season was not great, you should still get that bump from the first year with the new staff. And they have 16 commits. They're all 3-star prospects. There's no 4 stars in the class. So I don't know that I'm feeling great about Michigan State if that's what you're doing in your first year out on the road trying to sell your program.
Yeah. So, okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 20. Okay. This is the other thing. We two more things we want to talk about before our good friend Dan Wetzel comes by to talk about rivalries and conference championship games. Bill will join us to make that a 3-man conversation. As we said, Landis, right now, as it stands, the North has 27 of the top 100 players committed. We think it's a fair guide of, at the very least, the North should have as many players committed as they have in their area, right? So you have to protect the home turf. And if you lose a guy from the North to a Southern school, you should get at least one back. So that's the minimum threshold. So to have 27 Northern commits, by my count, in the top 100, there are 21 players in the North of the top 100 ranked recruits. So the North is 6 ahead there.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like acceptable, right? Is this a reasonable threshold as we try to, through the years, if we keep existing? At least that's a baseline. At least defend your home territory so that when you go out and grab some guys from the South, you're raising the level of talent.
Yeah, I think so. And maybe at some point we can like ascribe an acceptable percentage of guys you keep regardless, right? But yeah. I think as long as you're going out of your footprint then to make up for those losses, then I think it's okay. And maybe it's a school by school basis too, right? Like, you know, if there's a bunch of kids in the Pacific Northwest that don't end up going to Oregon, is Oregon going into Texas to make up for it, that kind of thing. But I think otherwise, yes, that feels reasonable.
So then of the 21 players who go to high school in the North, who are ranked among the top 100 recruits in the country, 12 of those 21 are committed to Northern schools, which actually is not quite as many as I think we would like, but
that feels low.
Then they are going out and making up for it elsewhere. Bryce Underwood, a Detroit kid, flipping from LSU to Michigan, we've covered it already, was a huge deal. He's the number 1 player in the class. And then Tavian St. Clair, a 5-star quarterback from Ohio, staying in state to go to Ohio State is a huge deal. The other top 100 kids who are staying north, and I apologize if I mispronounce any of these, Andrew Babalola, who's a Kansas player, is going to Michigan, number 14 in the nation. Big deal, right, Landis?
Yeah, number 2 tackle in the class. Is that right? Offensive tackle? Yeah.
Very big deal. Number 28 players, Trey McNutt, a safety from Ohio. That was a miss for Ohio State not to get him, but Oregon came and got him. At least Georgia or Bama or Texas didn't come and get him.
Yeah, that was a weird recruitment. Trey McNutt and like an Ohio State legacy, right? Like just didn't want to go to Ohio State.
Which is
I don't even know that. I don't know that even Ohio State lost him. It's like he just never was really interested.
Yeah. Will Black is an offensive tackle from Connecticut, number 35 player. He's going to Notre Dame. That's exactly what Notre Dame should be doing. Mm-hmm. Lincoln Cure, a tight end from Kansas, is committed to Kansas State, but you said Oregon's trying to flip him?
Oregon's trying to looking at a couple of tight ends, but I think he'd be their number 1 target to try to flip. Yeah.
But again, at least Texas A&M's not trying to flip him. He's going to wind up north either way. And it's one of these things. That's no solace to actual Kansas State fans. If they lose him, they're not going to be like, well, Doug said at least we lost him to the north. We understand that's not how it works.
Yeah, right.
We're looking at it holistically, right? But we understand you're looking at it parochially. You care about your school, but again, the North matters. Iosa Epinesa from Illinois, a legacy at Iowa. For Iowa to get him, you just don't assume anything. That was a big deal. Brandon Finney, a cornerback from Maryland, going to Oregon. Again, just Oregon working the North so that if a kid's going to leave the home state area to go to, I just think, again, Oregon is better than going to USC, Texas, or Alabama. Couple others that really mattered. Quincy Porter, receiver from New Jersey, going to Ohio State. Andrew Olesh, a tight end from Pennsylvania, going to Michigan. Carter Lowe, an offensive lineman from Ohio, staying in state. But Landis, there are 7 kids from the North who are going to the SEC. 2 to Georgia, 2 to Tennessee, 1 to Bama, 1 to Auburn, and 1 to Mizzou. And then there's 2 uncommitted kids. I don't love it. Georgia got a receiver from Illinois and a defensive lineman from New Jersey. Tennessee got like the best player in Indiana and a tight end from Kansas. Auburn flipped Nathaniel Marshall, who's a defensive lineman from Illinois. He was originally committed to Michigan. And then Auburn like goes and throws money around, right? And it is very odd because they stink. Justin Hill, an edge guy from Ohio, went to Alabama. Talon Taylor, like the best receiver in Illinois, which is kind of locked in on Georgia the whole way. There's some of those that I don't love, Landis, and I just think like maybe some Northern schools need to do a better job.
Yeah, especially when it's Auburn. Like I get that Auburn's firing the money cannon all around, but they're not good. They're gonna fire Hugh Freeze next year. Like,
yeah,
don't go to Auburn. Why would you go to Auburn?
Why would you go to Auburn? So the teams that frustrate me are Auburn and Texas A&M because I mean, if you're going to Georgia, I can put my hat on, but like, well, we get it.
Yeah, like Georgia, Bama, even Tennessee, like I get it. Yeah.
There's a little bit of the like Bama's not Bama anymore, so I would just check yourself before you're just like, I'm going to Bama. Because you're not going to Saban's Bama. You're going to 9-3, Kalen DeBoer trying to sneak in the back door of the playoff Bama. I would just be aware. The last thing we want to talk about is California. Southern California has been a battleground. Like Brock Bowers was from California and went to Georgia and really mattered. CJ Stroud was from California and went to Ohio State and really mattered. Bryce Young was from California, went to Alabama and really mattered. There are 8 kids from California in the top 100. None of them are coming north. 2 are staying home and going to USC. And the one kid who's uncommitted, Maiden Faremo, a linebacker, is probably going to pick USC over Notre Dame. So USC will wind up with 3 of those 8. But Bama got 3 and Texas A&M got 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so none of them are coming north. None of them are going to Oregon. I don't know that I do not accept the idea that the SEC owns California. Why is the SEC getting the best players in California? Michigan and Penn State and Notre Dame and Ohio State and Oregon should be getting a couple of those guys.
I wonder if there's the number 1 players going to Bama, the number 3 players going to Bama, the number 6 players going to Bama from California. How much of that is familiarity with the old Washington staff? That might be
Courtney
a piece
Morgan,
of it.
Morgan, who is the recruiting director, who was a recruiting director at Washington, is great at his job.
Yeah, I mean, like, any kid from California who decides to go to USC, like that makes sense to me. I don't like it either. Like, Ohio State has had some inroads in California from time to time, but nothing super consistent. Notre Dame certainly recruits California a lot, but aside from those 2 schools, and then whether or not Oregon and Washington can get guys to travel north from California, like those are the 4 schools that are going to make it happen. They just aren't doing it a ton with the top guys in California this year.
Okay. Anything else from a recruiting standpoint? Again, we'll check in on the news as it pops tomorrow with guys announcing on Wednesday. We'll try to keep up the best we can during the live show on that. But we kind of wanted to lay this down again. We acknowledge what the South does. We acknowledge where the North can do better, but at least they're above water in terms of how many kids are actually from this area and how many of the best kids overall are they getting. So, final thoughts from you?
Do you want to run through those 10 guys real quick from May?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay.
So we had done a show where we picked sort of 10 key Northern recruitments in May, and Landis did the legwork to go back and double check and see what happened.
I did. So the players were David Sanders, 5-star offensive tackle from North Carolina, is probably going to go to Tennessee. Ohio State is trying to flip him, but it sounds like he's going to stay with Tennessee. Julian Lewis, the 4-star quarterback from Georgia, is going to sign with Colorado, so there's a win for the North. Iosi Epinesa, who you mentioned, from Illinois, signing with Iowa. That's a win. Dwayne Galloway is a 4-star corner from Ohio, was committed to Purdue, has since decommitted, but he's not currently committed anywhere else, although it does seem like maybe he'll end up with Arizona State or Kentucky. So that could end up being a loss.
Come on, North.
Yeah, don't love that.
Derek Meadows. Kurt Signetti, get in on that.
Yeah, he could. Derek Meadows, 4-star receiver from Bishop Gorman in Vegas, currently committed to LSU, but will probably flip to Alabama, so that's a loss either way. But it's nice to watch Brian Kelly lose. DeCorian Moore, 5-star receiver from Texas, number 4 player in the country. He is going to Oregon, so that's a win for the North. CJ Bell, 3-star corner from UMass. So you identified him in that show. He's a fairly low-rated recruit. He's still kind of low, but he is higher now than he was at the time. He's going to Iowa, so that's a win for the North.
Hey, nice to done.
Madden Faremo, one of those California guys, 4-star linebacker, probably USC, perhaps Notre Dame, but probably USC, so we'll assume that's going to be a loss. Kainoa Winston was a big one, 4-star safety from Washington, D.C., going to Michigan. That's a nice win there.
Nice win.
And then John Anthony Hall, 4-star receiver from Indiana, is going to Stanford. So of the 10 guys that you highlighted back on May 30th, 5 are signing with Northern programs. 1, maybe in Dwayne Galloway, could find his way to 1. Another, perhaps Madden Faremo, could at the last second decide Notre Dame. But, 5 out of 10 is not bad.
Okay. Yeah, no, we'll take that. Yeah, it's all about what your comparison is. So I think the North's okay, getting better, could do better in big time recruiting. Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I think that's fair.
Okay. Quick break. When we come back, Dan Wetzel will join us on Kings of the North. Welcome back. 2 Kings of the North, Doug Lesmerises. Bill Landis, joined by Dan Wetzel. Dan, sorry we're late. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Sorry, I was crowding in on the camera there.
Patiently waiting. You're
big
very
headed,
patient,
big
Dan.
head there. How are you, Bill? Good to see you.
I'm good, Dan. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We want to talk about rivalries first, and we're going to talk about conference championship games. There was, Dan, we might play a game on the show eventually, and we would maybe invite you to come to play, because I think the more people you have playing a game, the more fun it is, where we would identify things tweeted and said by ridiculous people from the South, and then we would play a game called Troll, Honk, or Moron, and decide whether the thing, are they just trolling people? Are they so filled with SEC bias they can't see straight, or are they just dumb? Would you like to play that game with us sometime?
Sure.
Okay.
Troll, honk, or moron. Okay, those are
Troll,
my choices.
honk, or moron.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're not going to play today, but we're like laying the groundwork. We've got
I don't like to call people names, so we'll see how it goes. But
you might not be the right guy to play. You could just be in the studio audience and maybe get a prize for that.
We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes.
I have, from rivalry weekend, the last week of the regular season, I have 7 games that I considered like major games that were just rivalries that really had nothing to do with the playoff. I had 5 games that really weren't rivalries, but did have to do with the playoff, at least in some way. And then 12 that were both, that were rivalry games that also affected the playoff. Georgia Tech, Ohio State, Michigan, that kind of thing. Dan, somebody who I would maybe say was all of the above for our game show had something that said he thought that the 12-team playoff took away from the Ohio State-Michigan game in some way. And I would argue, where Ohio State fans are heartbroken, asking whether their coach should be fired, and the teams had a fight on the field after the game, I would say that wasn't my view. What did you think of the Ohio State-Michigan rivalry in the 12-team playoff? Was it affected by the expanded playoff? And then we can expand that to other rivalries, but I think that's a good lens to start the conversation.
So...
Technically, Dan's worried I'm going to call him a name. He's worried I'm going to call him a name.
You can call me a honk or more. Call me names all you want. Okay, so technically, yeah. See, 2 years ago they had a game, and Ohio State lost, and then they still made the playoff, right? So yeah, you still had this in the 4-team playoff, which is what I've always argued. But technically, sure, Ohio State's season did not end, so something was diminished. However, we're talking about like 1% off of an otherwise 99 out of 100 score in intensity. I mean, nothing was lost. This was other than Ohio State's season isn't over. I guess it could be even more calamitous for the Buckeyes. But as you mentioned, 2 words, pepper spray. The fans were booing in the middle of the game. Ryan Day looked terrified. The Sharon Moore looked exhilarated. The Michigan players that did not have a great season had their, walking on clouds, walking out of there. And the Ohio State players that have a chance to win the national championship were disgusted and angry. Nothing. The fans, I remember 2 years ago, driving out of Columbus and listening to the talk radio there, 97.1, and just listening to the call-ins, which were just epic. And I'm sure they're even worse this year. So no, nothing was lost. Is it different slightly? Sure. But to suggest that anything was lost, I don't know that we want this game to mean more. Like, what's the next step? I mean, we had pepper spray. This should be the level. This right. I'm not one that's like offended and, oh my God, the game there's a fight. No, I don't really care. But like, this could not have mattered more to either side. The fans, the players, the coaches. So no, I don't know what that is. I don't know if someone actually believes that.
Well, that's why we have to invest. So Dan, let's think of it less as a game show and more as an investigation, because you are an investigative reporter. Yeah. We can go find the person who tweeted that and really try to find out, are they a troll? Are they a honk?
I don't think it's a troll. Moron? I just say misguided. If you were anywhere in the states of Ohio or Michigan, I'm not a Michigan fan nor a Ohio State fan, but I live in Michigan.
Yeah.
And I mean, even Michigan State fans, people who did like you could just see the nutty. I mean, this is crazy. How much more could a game matter?
I think that you're. I 100% agree, Dan. I was at that game. It's the only game I've gone to where, as I was walking to post game interviews, I was getting texts from people asking me if I was okay.
No.
So, like, what else do you need to know about
Yeah.
the intensity of that Saturday?
Yeah, the remember the old Malice in the Palace when the Pistons and like it wasn't a playoff game. Could it have meant more? I guess, but did we want more? No, that I think it meant a lot, even though it was a November basketball. Like sometimes these things happen. So no, nothing was lost.
Yeah,
nothing ever will be lost. We had this chapter in Death to the BCS, which I wrote a long time ago. But one of the things they came up with was, once you clinch a playoff spot, teams will start to rest their starters like the NFL sometimes does in the last week. And they literally used Ohio State as an example. I said, yes, you would absolutely rest your starters for the playoff if you wanted to get fired immediately.
Yeah.
Like you imagine Ryan Day or Sharon Moore or whoever coming out and being like, this game doesn't matter. We're going to rest up for the playoff here. We'll play the 2s and 3s.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, Ryan Day, when this was, Brian Day actually brought that up like a couple years ago. And it was like, that was one of those moments like, do you understand your job? I don't know. Like, remember that Landis when he brought that up? And it was sort of like,
rest for the Big Ten title game? No,
like, especially if it's like he was saying, if they were both clinched and you knew Ohio State, Michigan were going to play again. It's like, well, the first game wouldn't matter as much. And it was like, I don't think that's true.
I promise you that it would.
I would not do that. I also think really the thing that has devalued the regular season more than anything else is the conference championship game. It applies statistically applies in more manners, because it's like a lot of teams are clinched and you can, like, did Georgia Tech not matter because Georgia was already in the SEC championship game?
Yeah.
No. They played 8 overtimes and looked exactly right. Maybe you're going to get to that one. I don't know. I'm sorry.
No, but the point is, it wasn't like Kirby Smart pulled his guys off the field after the second overtime and put in the third team. Was like, we got to rest the starters for the SEC championship game.
No, right. That's what it's like. It's a complete lack of understanding of college football. It matters desperately. Some years it's not the case this year, but one of my favorite rivalry games is the Egg Bowl, right? Mississippi and Mississippi State. They have no pro sports teams there. This is all they really have. They aren't really that good in any others. They do baseball well, but basketball, they're okay. But like, this is it. They play this game, and some years they're both 3-8, and the game is played with a level of intensity like it's the Super Bowl, and that's college football. And that's you cannot make that up. You can't create it and you can't kill it. So absolutely not. It was different, slightly different, because I will say the stakes could be higher, but if you saw the look on Ryan Day's face for 4 hours on Saturday, do you really want a man to be tortured more?
Yes. Right.
Well, some
Landis,
people do, but yeah.
Can you imagine, Landis, if Ryan Day would have come into the postgame and been like, well, we're still in the playoffs. Right?
Yeah, no, he was asked, how do you get this team ready for the playoff now? And he said, like, I don't know. Like, I'm not thinking about
processing.
That. Like, yeah. It's like we just lost for the 4th straight time. Yeah, he had the word playoff would not have been said if someone in the media didn't ask it to him in a question. Like, that is not at all where his mind was after that game.
So I think I have maybe simplified this down to heart games versus head games. And a rivalry is a heart game. When people say throw out the records, like that is, I hate this other team, and for 3.5 hours, this is all I care about. I don't really care about context. I don't really care about what it means to anything else. I want to beat somebody I hate. That's your heart. And then once the game is over, maybe you go check the conference standings, or maybe you go check a playoff bracket. But I don't think any Ohio State fan in the stadium was checking a playoff bracket. It's like, oh man, Jaden Fielding missed a second field goal. I think we host that 8-9 game versus Tennessee. That was not what anybody was doing during the game. You might do it on Sunday. You might do it on Monday, but I think it is such a separate thing, Dan. And maybe this is what makes college football great and different is, the Browns and the Steelers hate each other, right? But probably you're still maybe a little bit more aware of the division standings, right? That I think the heart matters most in college football, and the heart is not diminished. The head adds to it, maybe, but I don't think the hate and the heart has not changed, which is why I really push back on anybody because again, if you want the season to be over, that really is more of a head conversation. Oh, we lost to the team that I hate, and now we can't go to the Rose Bowl, and now we can't go to the playoff. So I don't know. I think it's two paths. Our producer Mike is saying, what Ohio State fans rather beat Michigan than win a national championship. That's like a very divisive Ohio State fan topic. Some are one or some are on the other side. But I actually think they just want both. Yeah. I think at the very least, both are equal. One's a heart conversation, one's a head conversation, which is why, Dan, I think what happens the last weekend of the regular season now is you get some heart games, you get some head games. BYU Houston's not a heart game, but it mattered for who was going to go to the Big 12 championship. And then you get a good at least 10 that are both, that are amplified. So that's, Dan, why I just don't think, I think someone really trying to make an argument is wrong.
Let me add two things to that. So I also cover the NFL, and I know you did too for a long time, Doug. And when you talk to NFL guys about college, especially like people in the league office or general man, they'd always be like, how come they can't get a playoff going? It doesn't make any sense. Why would you play your most important game at a neutral site? Like, things that just, if you were like, we're moving the AFC Championship game out of Kansas City or Buffalo this year, we're going to play it at University of Phoenix Stadium.
Right.
Like, what are we doing? Like, why? And, we get half the money because we run this thing. Right. So there's things that don't make sense to either side. But the one thing the NFL has tried to do, because they now play divisional games, is make the last week matter. Right. And football is a game that you have to play hard or you're going to get hurt. So you see it all the time. Teams will blow their draft position by winning some meaningless 17th week, 18th week, whatever it is now, game, and they go from the second pick to the seventh, and you lose out on the franchise quarterback that would save you. So they always play hard, but they sit there and go, gosh, how could we make it so that Iowa State game, like that's the one thing the NFL can't do. They can't create. Now, there are times rivalries pop up. Buffalo and Kansas City is absolutely a big rivalry now because they're both good, but it's not generations of anger. The other thing is, as much as you say, well, okay, Ohio State's still in, they did lose something, right? They lost a chance. They could possibly have to go on the road. And really, if they want to accentuate the regular season, they have to take the quarterfinals and perhaps the semifinals and put them on campus. Because all of a sudden, if Ohio State says, all right, let's say Ohio State drops to 9, has to play 10 at Tennessee. That's a huge difference. Then the winner has to go to Oregon in the quarterfinals. And then in the if they win the semis, they would have to go play who's going to be 2? Texas or something like that on the road. If you make those road games, now there is a greater value on the regular season. And so this is an enormously more difficult situation. Instead, what we had with the 4 team is it didn't matter whether you're 1, 2, 3, or 4. You just got in there. It behooved Michigan 2 years ago to be the 2 seed and play TCU, albeit they lost. Then to be the 1 seed, Georgia had to play Ohio State. So, and it was all on neutral sites. If you get rid of that, it becomes even more of a blow. Right now, maybe Ohio State's they don't have to play a Big Ten title game, so they're out of that. They can rest up. Maybe I expect they will host a game. But if they had to all of a sudden be staring at a quarterfinal where they're playing the 1 seed or the 2 seed at their place, now there's a major blow. So it's really quite an easy way to add some more juice, and it's to get rid of the second tier bowl games that are going to host this quarterfinal, which makes no sense.
The one thing, Bill, that I do think is that we have another game that I think that was an example of like we really haven't lost anything was the Washington-Oregon game, because Oregon had a Big Ten title game appearance locked up. They could have rested all their starters, said we're going to play in the Big Ten title game regardless, and if we win the Big Ten title game, we're going to be the 1 seed, whether we lose to Washington or beat Washington. But Oregon still wanted to beat Washington, Bill. Like I think we almost had like the example of, well, what if it, quote, doesn't matter? It's a rivalry game. It, quote, didn't matter. Washington had its bowl spot already locked up, but they still want to beat each other because it's a rivalry.
Tez Johnson and Jordan Birch played. Like, what more do you need to know? Like, they're two best players, right, for Oregon, who have been injured and not played in previous weeks. Of course, you'd want to rest those guys. Maybe you don't even want to play them in a Big Ten championship because you know you're already in the playoff. But they played them against Washington because of what that game means. Dan Lanning never beat Washington, and then with an opportunity to hammer them instead of like resting his guys after it was pretty obvious that Washington wasn't game, he kept his guys out there to make sure he made a point with the game. Like, I feel like we're stating the obvious. Like, of course, these games don't matter, right? Like, the notion that they don't is asinine. But if you can just look at the aftermath of Ohio State, Michigan, and the intensity of that, and the fact that Oregon played its best guys when it did not have to against Washington, like, what else do you need? I honestly don't know.
Recruiting matters too, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, Oregon wants to recruit Seattle. A lot of great players up there, and so the more times they beat the hell out of Washington, which they have not done lately, the better, right? It's easier to go into a high school in Seattle area and recruit if you're like, hey, we just pounded your team there. If you sat there and said, yeah, we quit, we're resting, we're it's like Washington wins the game, they're going to be like, that team's not serious, we play them all. You don't want to lose that recruiting advantage. So that's another dynamic that the NFL doesn't have.
Yeah. And so again, I would argue, I thought like rivalry games that were just rivalry games this week, right? Washington, Oregon, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Nebraska, Iowa, Louisville, Kentucky, North Carolina State, Florida State, Virginia Tech, Illinois, Northwestern. A couple games that weren't rivalries, but mattered. Miami, Syracuse really mattered. But you aren't going to get people fired up for the rivalry game, but the playoff enhanced what would have been a good, competitive, high-scoring game. Syracuse knocked Miami out of the playoff.
Maybe
that's an upstate New York. I don't know that anybody thinks Miami's going to get in, but they could have played their way in otherwise. But Dan, that's an upstate New York, South Florida matchup in a convoluted conference that the playoff made matter. Just the same way BYU Houston matters. So, like, again, to have all these rivalries and throw Syracuse, Miami into that, I'll give you 2 minutes on Miami's playoff case too. But I thought that was a great example of what the 12-team playoff could do for the regular season.
Oh, 100%. It made more games matter more. And there's BYU Houston was a classic, right? If you're really dialed into this sport, you're watching this game at the middle of the night, and because it matters. It's like Colorado, all the people in Colorado are wondering if Houston can win it. We're in. It's all this different dynamics. So you absolutely get more games to matter more because of the playoff. And if you lose it's really a lot of the like, we lost something is kind of like it's like sepia toned memories, right? Because again, like 2 years ago, Michigan wins at Ohio Stadium, and it was a glorious win for Michigan and a devastating loss for Ohio State. And then a week later, Ohio State gets in the playoff anyway. So it happened a lot of times in the 4-team playoff. We had it in 2-team playoffs and all that stuff. So it happens. Do you want my Miami take? My Miami take is they got 10 wins. Their only 2 losses are to Georgia Tech and Syracuse. Those are good losses, both on the road, both close, good losses. We don't know what this committee will favor in the end. If those are quality losses for Miami. Do they have a ton of great wins? No, but if they don't have a loss to Vanderbilt or Ole Miss lost to Kentucky or things like that. So where Miami appears in the Tuesday rankings, I think is going to be very indicative of we don't know what this committee will favor, but if it's about, hey, look, they won all their games except for these 2 road losses that were extremely close, they got a pretty good case. Those Georgia Tech and Syracuse are both 8-win teams, maybe not 9 for Syracuse.
9-3.
Yeah. There's a quality losses. So that's why I wouldn't rule them completely out.
Bill, what do you think of that idea? I think especially like if SMU wins the ACC, so Clemson's definitely out, and then probably this becomes a Miami-Bama conversation, does it not? And what Wetzel's outlining here, what do you think of that Miami-Bama conversation then, Bill?
I think it's one worth having. I don't think it's as cut and dry as people are making it out to be with Bama's third loss, and I guess like the quality of some of those losses. I also like that, Doug, it seemed like you were really ready to go to the mat to fight the idea that Miami should be in the playoff, and then Dan said it's because Syracuse is a quality loss, and then I could see the conflict in your eyes. We're like, oh man, do I really want to fight this? No, I think it's a real conversation. I could see it. I don't know what the committee will value there. If it's like because Alabama does have better wins than Miami, right? But it also has
better
They have a
wins, but
Georgia
two
win.
bad losses.
two bad losses and fewer wins overall, right? So it'll be really instructive, I guess, on this committee's thought process in the 12-team era, how they decipher between those two resumes.
And I do think people know this. We have a very smart, engaged college football audience here. But what you're going to see on Tuesday night is really, really going to matter because there's a bunch of teams that aren't playing any more games. So Miami and Alabama don't have any more of a case to make. So where they are situated, also, the committee could flip them next week for no reason. So it's not like it's set in stone. Tennessee, Ohio State really matters tonight, right? So pay attention Tuesday night. These games, Bill, I just want to, before we get to a conference championship conversation real quick, these were the 12 games I had that wound up being both head and heart games. And I just think like the playoff stuff, I think enhanced a lot of these, right? So even if you think Ohio State, Michigan lost 2%, Georgia Tech, Georgia, right? That was a rivalry. But if Georgia would have lost that and then would have lost the SEC championship game, and now does 4-loss Georgia get in? I think there was a little bit of an edge, of a head edge to that game, Bill, that helped, that the playoff helped. It wasn't just going to be a, hey, what a great win for Georgia Tech. It had a slight chance, at least, to mess with Georgia's season if they would have lost, right?
Yeah, it would have put them against their backs against the wall going to the SEC championship game. Of course, yeah, it would have borderline derailed their Georgia season going into because like whichever team Georgia was going to play. I know Georgia beat Texas, and I guess it's not technically a neutral field either, playing in Atlanta, but different circumstances. In the last time the two teams played, I don't think it's a guarantee that Georgia was going to beat Texas the second time around. It would have put a ton of pressure on. Like Georgia doesn't have any pressure now going to the SEC championship game, other than like trying to get a bye, right? But they're in, so totally changed it. Yeah.
So
I think as this thing plays out,
Dan. Yeah.
We haven't seen it, but like these seeds are going to so matter. Let's say Georgia had lost the Georgia Tech game and still won the SEC. They might not be the 2 seed. So they might end up a 3 or even a 4 seed. And now your second round game is against either let's say Oregon loses to Penn State or something, or you have a harder game. And again, if they would just get the last vestiges of this old system are these quarterfinal neutral sites. They got to go. It would add a lot of drama to this weekend. If you're talking about home field advantage, what are the Bills and Chiefs fighting over right now? It's not just, we're going to be in, it's where do we go play that game?
Yeah.
What are the Eagles and the Lions fighting over? Where are they going to play that game? Home field. And then that little bit of a seating difference can be significant on who you might get stuck playing. So I think when it plays out, people have maybe, is my guess, will have a better view of like this whole bit of like, well, we're in. It's not the NCAA basketball tournament where you have everyone's in. Doesn't really matter where you're seated after the first round, and everything's neutral site. It's a much more difficult tournament. Go ahead.
And I do, but we're so excited. We're so excited for the first round campus games. You're really, I don't know that I've heard a lot of people push this, Dan. It's like, why does it have to be just one round? The excitement of what we're talking about. Why is that a one-time thing? Why aren't we doing that more?
Because the bowl industry. Yeah.
Because the bowl industry. You hate the bowl industry more than anybody.
Well, they're taking away awesome games. I would love to see a quarterfinal I'd love to see a quarterfinals on campus.
Yeah.
100%.
Texas A&M, you nailed this a couple of weeks ago, Dan, how big that was going to be. They were going to hate each other and be excited to finally play each other anyway. It was a play-in game for the SEC championship. That was as much heart and head as you could get. Notre Dame USC really mattered for the playoff. Tennessee Vanderbilt mattered for the playoff. They hate each other. This was Vandy's chance to maybe knock Tennessee out of the playoff, right? Purdue Indiana still mattered. If Purdue had a pulse, they could have knocked Indiana out of the playoff there. South Carolina, Clemson, Auburn, Alabama, Arizona State, Arizona, Kansas State, Iowa State. Anyway, it was great. Are the conference championship games going to be great is now the question. Dan, you think they should be abolished? Where are you officially on at conference championship games?
I hate taking
Do you
away...
like Dr. Pepper? Do you like Dr. Pepper? And do you want it promoted?
I don't really like Dr. Pepper.
I don't really like it either.
It's
like half cola, half root beer. I can just go either way. I don't need an in between of that.
Yeah, it's not my thing. okay, I hate seeing, like, I'm excited for the weekend. A lot of great games.
Yes.
Part of me would like to see a better playoff structure, like the calendar where we're getting 2 games in December, 2 rounds, and then the semifinals are New Year's Day. And then, so there's part of me is like, eliminate them. I also have this philosophical argument of this weekend where, if you're already in let's say you're already in SMU and Boise State will be in the field after 12 games. Why should they have to play a 13th game and then if they lose, get jumped by a team that didn't have to play a 13th game? It's like making somebody run an extra, it's a 100-meter dash, but you got to run 110.
Yeah.
And right, it doesn't make any sense philosophically to do it. So like, if the field, and I argued this when USC a couple years ago, it's not that I actually believed USC deserved to be in the playoff over Ohio State, but USC after 12 games was the number 4 ranked team. Then they lost to Utah in the Pac-12 title game and they got bounced out. And Ohio State, which didn't have to do anything, got moved in. Again, it's not about the individual teams. It's just the philosophically, like, that doesn't make any sense to me because you've already done your 12. Like, if this is the season, so I could get rid of them in a lot of that. But that said, this is going to be a very exciting weekend. That Mountain West championship game is going to be really good, right? Like UNLV, Boise is going to be a really exciting game, and everyone who loves college football is going to watch. And we would never have that any other time. When was the last Mountain West championship game you watched?
I'm watching.
The ACC championship game is going to be huge. A lot of championship weekend under the 4 team was a total waste of time. The games didn't matter, or they were completely lopsided affairs. It's like, okay, is Michigan going to beat Iowa by 30 points or 40 or whatever? So the leagues have gotten too big. They don't play each other. There's a lot of reasons to still have it. I'm just kind of torn on it. But generally, I don't want to see good football go away. But there are practical reasons and philosophical reasons where you say, forget it, we don't need it.
It's interesting to me, Bill, that of the 4 power conference championship games, we have 2 with the biggest name schools and the biggest name conferences that don't matter as much because all 4 of those teams are going to be in Georgia, Texas, Penn State, Oregon. And then the other 2 conferences are playing games, which is how much more exciting can you get? Arizona State, Iowa State, SMU, Clemson. So which is better? Because I don't know. I don't think the SEC and the Big Ten will ever get to the point where the loser of that game's not in. So I think this is the model of what the SEC and Big Ten games will be. They're playing for a bye, which matters, but it's not the same stakes as in or out. Imagine how huge this game is for Iowa State, or how huge it is for Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State, or what it would mean to SMU, right? So, like, which games are better?
Yeah, I mean, the ones with the most stakes are better, I guess, but it's not like the Big Ten and SEC have no stakes, right? Like, I would even apply even what Dan said about the recruiting thing and the Oregon-Washington game to the conference title games. Like, if you're Texas, don't you want to go out recruiting this offseason with an SEC championship ring? If you're Penn State, don't you want to go do it with the Big Ten championship ring? So, like, I think that matters even if you don't win a national title. I think the seeding is incredibly important still. The bye obviously is. So it doesn't have the ultimate stakes, but there's things still at play that matter that I think will get these teams to put forward their best effort and, like, play all their guys. I'm not worried about that. So I'm excited for it. I think the best game of the weekend very well might be the Mountain West title game. But that's okay. As long as they're all good, then I'm okay with, like, what degrees of good they are, because I think they're all going to be good.
Those are good teams too. Here's one more point on this. The only championship game that isn't the only league that hasn't actually didn't determine a champion in the regular season is the Big 12. Arizona State and Iowa State are both 7-2.
Right.
Everyone else, Texas is got 7-1. Oregon's 9-0, Indiana or Penn State's 8-1. Like, everyone else lost a game. They already won the league. Boise State has to beat UNLV again. Right. They already beat them at UNLV. Like, you got to beat them again, and we're doing this for TV. And again, I'm fired up to watch the game. I think the Sun Belt both have the same, but I don't know how much people are caring about that, and the MAC. But the rest of them already were determined. You could sit there and say, hey, Texas, congratulations, you won the Big Ten. Or, I mean, the SEC, and you can go out and recruit as SEC champs. So I'm just torn. Like, I'm never going to be against more football, and I'm never going to be against more great football. And I think every one of these games will be ferociously competed upon, and I'm going to love it. But there are kind of, you're like, what is this little relic? But again, give me home field in the quarters and semis, and these games matter a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Okay. We will let Dan Wetzel go. Dan, appreciate your time as always. We'll see you next week. And Bill Landis and I will be back to revisit our preseason KOTN Big Ten poll after this. Doug Lesmerises, Bill Landis. Back on Kings of the North. If you're watching live, you want to give us a thumbs up, you want to subscribe, you want to tell a friend. If you're listening back on a podcast, you want to drop a review on Apple Podcasts or anything. We just appreciate you guys being here. We don't want to make it feel like homework. So you don't have to do stuff, Bill, right? That's not like, oh man, I just wanted to watch the show. And then they were like, I got to give a thumbs up. It's okay if they don't.
Yeah, it's fine. I mean, we appreciate it if you do, but no one's forcing you.
I didn't want to drag this out with Dan because he has a life to lead, but I do want to ask you one more conference championship game question before we move on to our KOTN preseason poll stuff. The 1 seed versus 5 seed discussion, I want to see what happens, but I'll be curious, Bill, if it turns out that the 1 seed, say it feels like Ohio State, Tennessee has a very good chance to be the 8-9 game, right? And Ohio State was, at the very least, the preseason co-favorite. They suffered an upset loss to their rival, which knocked them out of a chance to be the 1 seed or the 5 seed. And now they might be the 8 seed, which means they would play the 1 seed in the quarterfinals.
Right.
So if Oregon wins the Big Ten championship to get the 1 seed, and their reward is a bye week and then playing a team they already beat, and by the way, Oregon is going to have played more recently than Ohio State. Ohio State sort of had extra time off to heal because it did not have to play. Well, no, they would have played it one at the time off. But the bye almost equals out is my point. Because like Ohio State gets a bye this week while Oregon's playing, and then Oregon would get the bye the next time while Ohio State's playing. So it's not a huge advantage there, I don't think. But anyway, if that's what Oregon gets and the 5 seed does get, let's say, whatever, Arizona State in the first round and Boise State in the second round, right?
Yeah.
And if it really plays out like that, and it's like, oh, great, we had to play this kind of very talented power conference team that kind of had a goofy loss, and you got to play 2 lesser talented teams, which is not a swipe at anybody in the Big 12 or the Mountain West. I'll be curious how that will be viewed going forward. I want to see it play out. I'm not all the way there on like a lot of people are at the 5 seed is better than the 1 seed right now. I'm not there right now, but I want to see what happens. And if the 8 beats the 1, I will be curious what the conversation will be. I think it would be a reasonable conversation. And then I think it would be reasonable to discuss something about how maybe the bracket would change. And maybe that would include no longer making the top 4 seeds the 4 conference champs. Maybe it's just the 4 best teams.
Yeah, it could be that. It could be, reseeding wouldn't necessarily erase that problem, but it could help you out depending on if there were other upsets, right? I want to see it play out too. I've gone back and forth on like what do I think the 5 is definitely better than the 1. Like I definitely understand the argument. It's a pretty compelling one. I don't know that it's universal. I do think it'll be year to year. Like sometimes there'll be an Ohio State in the 8 seed, and sometimes it'll be like a maybe not all that good Big Ten or SEC team that just kind of got its way there, and you're not super worried about them, right? So I don't know that that'll always be the case. Although maybe it is far more likely than not that it'll usually be a team that is pretty good in that spot. So they've already shown like malleability with this by announcing the 12-team playoff and then saying like immediately after they're going to expand it. So if there is something that happens in this initial playoff where the 1 seed gets knocked out by an 8 seed that should be a 2 seed, then maybe there's some reassessment there.
And I do think it would be very easy because we're going to get to a 14-team playoff anyway, so there's only going to be 2 buys. So then if you just are giving the 2 buys to the 2 highest ranked conference champs, then I don't think the 3 and the 4 seed have to be conference champs.
Yeah.
Right. So then it opens it up, and all of a sudden, because what the issue becomes, and it's just the way with the consolidation of major brands into the SEC and the Big Ten, the real conversation becomes, is the 3rd best team in the SEC or Big Ten better than the ACC, Big 12, or Group of 5 conference champ? Because that's the question. Because that 8-9 game, it's going to be, and it might work out perfectly this year, if the 8-9 game is the 3rd best SEC versus the 3rd best Big Ten.
Yeah.
And the 4 is like the lesser of the conference champs. We're going to get the exact scenario. So anyway, we'll let it play out, but we're not blind to it. We're alert to it.
No. Yeah.
How do you think our KOTN preseason poll did?
We nailed a couple of them.
We did nail a couple of them. So this is just a reminder that the Big Ten, and this is why we're making this a Big Ten conversation. We certainly don't mean to ignore our ACC and Big 12 Northern brothers in this conversation. But the ACC and the Big 12 are competent conferences that do their own preseason polls. And so everybody can have this conversation about like, hey, and it's been a constant conversation in the Big 12, Bill, right? That Arizona State was picked last and is in the conference championship game. And Utah and Kansas and Oklahoma State and these teams who were picked in the top 4 had terrible years, right? Mm-hmm. So that's been an ongoing conversation because the Big 12 does a poll. The Big 10 has not for more than a decade. And when they gave that up, we took it over at Cleveland.com. I started the media poll that had been the only thing that gave anybody a reference point. So when you get to the end of the year, you can say, oh, this team, and people reference it all the time. Announcers love to say this team was picked blank, but they finished blank. You can't do that if there's not a preseason poll. So the Big Ten abandoned their responsibility, and I took it up. And of all the things that I've done in my life, my meaningless, soft, privileged life, right? I'm okay taking credit for this because it was me. So it's like the Cleveland.com poll. It was me. Okay? So like that's okay. So then I left Cleveland.com, but now we're here. So we did our own version of this too. And I think we did the best one. So now it's the KOTN poll. So we're going to have this conversation because it's our poll. Is that okay? Am I talking about this too much? I'm just still so mad about the Big Ten more than 10 years later that they've abandoned this responsibility and made me do it.
I'm mad at the Big Ten too, but I do think it is worth getting across the point that this is the poll of record. There are many polls like it, but not as good as this one.
Yeah. So this is what happened in the preseason poll and how it played out at the end of the year. Ohio State was like the overwhelming number 1 pick, and they finished fourth, which is like one of those things that's like, oh, whatever. It's like Ohio State finished 4th in the Big Ten, which is kind of like, sounds weird, but is like 1,000% accurate. They had 2 conference losses. Ohio State, 4th place Big Ten team.
It is odd for Ohio State to be the 4th place Big Ten team while beating number 2 and number 3, but
it is.
Here we are.
But I don't know. And you can say, well, of course, Penn State and Indiana didn't have to play Oregon, but it's like they did this to themselves. Mm-hmm. This is how they've done this. It's a gigantic conference. Of course, the schedules have to be unequal. There's no divisions, but there's no other way to say it. Ohio State finished 4th.
Yeah, that is what the record will show.
That is what the record will show.
When we look back at it.
Oregon finished 1st, was picked 2nd in our poll. Penn State was picked 3rd and finished 2nd. I didn't say tied for 2nd because the tiebreaker went to them, so they are 2nd. But anyway, those were all pretty good. It was obvious, and all 3 of those teams turned out being super competitive and sort of, along with Indiana, were the stories of the season. But we don't have to, it was like 34 media members from around the Big Ten. We don't exactly have to give ourselves a slap on the back for figuring out Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State were going to be good.
No, I think that was fairly obvious.
Congrats to us.
Yeah.
Michigan was picked 4th and finished tied for 7th. I do think we have to remember that there was quite a debate over, like, is Michigan a playoff team or not? Is Michigan a playoff team or not? And the answer was like definitively no. But there kind of were like a lot of people who kind of thought they might be at the beginning of the year, right?
Yeah, I think so. There were plenty of playoff projections. I think maybe I can't remember what my final preseason one was, but there were definitely off-season playoff predictions that I did that had Michigan in the playoff. And I think you might have had them a time or two.
Yeah. No, I think I certainly had them in at times. And one of the other things I asked the preseason voters was individually about teams. Will they make the playoff or not? Will Michigan make the playoff? 52% yes, 48% no. So it was pretty split. And then the season played out in a way that, no, this was not a team that was like on the brink of making the playoff. Although the point has been made, by the people who, appreciate Michigan. If they don't lose at Washington, and my gosh, I mean, who would have predicted Michigan to lose to Indiana? And they had a tough schedule, but there's a way that if Michigan had just been slightly more competent at quarterback, you could have seen your way to a 10-2 season for Michigan, right?
Yeah, I think a couple of things break differently, right? Like I think people were assuming two out of three, dropping 2 out of 3 to Ohio State, Texas, and Oregon.
Right,
which actually happened.
Right.
But it was in the Illinois. No one saw that coming, right?
Right.
Washington is not one that people had penciled in there. So, but those were games that Michigan, I think, conceivably could have won, right? They're like fairly evenly matched games.
But yeah, I mean if Michigan's 10-2 with losses to Oregon and Texas, they're so in the playoff, it's not even a discussion. They're like a 6 seed.
Yeah, and then we might be having uncomfortable conversations about Ohio State.
Yeah,
if
for
that
real.
Were the case.
Like with the head-to-head. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Or Indiana. But now we get
into
maybe
probably. Well,
because if Michigan had beaten Indiana, then Indiana would have 2 losses. But yeah, anyway, like it's on one hand, I can say, okay, they finished tied for 7th. They were picked 4th. It was basically 50-50 on will they make the playoff. They weren't close to a playoff team. And now we're playing the Lincoln Riley Bambi game. Well, only 3 of us that's 3 more games you would have had to win. But it's not impossible to imagine Michigan, with all their flaws, maybe still finding ways to beat Washington, Indiana, and Illinois.
No, I'm not pounding the table for like Michigan's actually great, but I think you can watch the way those games played out and convince yourself that Michigan could have won them, or maybe should have won them.
Flaws were slightly less flawy. Maybe they would have had a shot there. So Michigan was picked 4th, finished tied for 7th. Iowa was picked 5th and finished tied for 5th. So actually, like losing to Iowa State makes them an 8-4 team instead of a 9-3 team. But otherwise, I think Iowa kind of had the season people expected.
Yeah. I mean, Michigan State flipped it. Otherwise, it would have been right on track.
Yep. USC was picked 6th and finished tied for 9th. USC was just blew games like nobody's business this year. The 2 leaders in blowing games this year were USC and Ole Miss. But USC won. They won the blowing games the most trophy, which I think the Big Ten is handing out awards right now as we speak.
They are.
And I think they did. Did they say that? Did USC get the blowing games the best trophy from the Big Ten?
They did. They had Lincoln Riley on. They presented him a trophy.
Oh, that's good.
It was a big poop emoji.
A golden poop emoji. I'm trying to think. You know how the Big Ten names all the awards for legends? I'm trying to think like a mean joke to make of what that trophy would be named.
The Scott Frost You Almost Won award. Yeah.
Might be the Scott Frost, John Cooper, You Almost Won But You Blew It award is presented to Lincoln Riley. That's a poop emoji. Because that's so Big Ten too. They couldn't just pick one person to name stuff after, so everything's hyphenated. Because if there's 2 things the Big Ten insists on doing, right? Number 1 is making money, and number 2 is not hurting feelings. That's even number 3 is talking about libraries. Not hurting feelings comes in ahead of talking about libraries, which is hard to do. Number 6 was USC. They finished tied for 9th. Number 7 was Wisconsin. They finished tied for 12th. Number 8 was Nebraska. They finished tied for 12th. As much as like there's, I'm like, they took a shot on Phil Longo, and sometimes, Nebraska made a bowl. They also weren't as good as people thought they were going to be.
No, they weren't. It was a bad season.
Yeah, is that fair? Is that where we've officially landed?
Yeah.
With 5-7 Wisconsin and 6-6 Nebraska, bad season.
We're officially in bad, yeah.
Because we were in preseason, we were in like, I don't know what to tell you, Matt Rule, 2nd-year turnarounds. I mean, they're going to be 10-2. It's just history, Bill. It's just history. 9 or 10 wins for Nebraska. It's undeniable. Didn't happen.
Didn't happen.
Rutgers, I told Greg Schiano I thought he'd go 7-2 in the Big Ten. He punched me in the throat. He was correct to do so. Rutgers was actually picked 9th in our poll and finished tied for 9th. And Washington fans were mad that Washington was picked 10th in the preseason poll, and they finished tied for 9th. So Rutgers and Washington.
They're vindicated. They were right. They were too low.
Yeah, they are what we thought they'd be. Rutgers and Washington get that award. Maryland, I thought Maryland would be bad. This was like among the few things I got right. I had Maryland going 0-9 in the Big Ten, and they finished 17th, right? They finished really bad.
They had one Big Ten win, right? USC?
Yeah. So that they shouldn't have won. So I almost nailed it with 0-9 Maryland. So they were picked 11th. They finished much worse. Minnesota, yeah, I mean, thank goodness for Purdue, or Maryland would have been last. I can't believe Bambi loses to Maryland. What is happening? Are you so glad? Do you wish we counted USC in the North just so we could rip Lincoln Riley more? Or is it fun to just throw rocks at him from afar and otherwise ignore USC?
No, I like being able only to talk about when he's bad and not care about when they're good.
Okay, then we nailed it. So Maryland was picked 11th, finished 17th. Minnesota was picked 12th, finished tied for 7th. I feel like I feel justified in like saying in the end Minnesota had a good year, which I kind of was saying all year, and they did.
Mm-hmm. But they good. Yeah, they definitely had a good year. I thought it was a really nice step forward, or step back in the right direction from last year. Definitely.
Yeah. So that was good for Maryland. Who was 13th? UCLA was picked 13th. They finished tied for 12th. I think that was kind of right. Illinois was picked 14th and finished tied for 5th. That was a huge whiff by me, but also a whiff by the poll. Congrats to the Illini for shoving it up our you know what's.
Cram holes. Yeah, I had Illinois pretty low too. I can't recall where, but I guess the two teams we were most, I guess 3 were Maryland, Illinois, and Indiana.
Yeah, that we were too low on Illinois and Indiana and too high on Maryland. Michigan State, it's like one of those, you can say like, man, Michigan State had a bad year. They were picked 15th and they finished tied for 12th. So they were 3-6, right? But it feels worse than that because they did fall apart down the stretch.
Yeah, there were some rough Big Ten games in there.
Yeah. So they finished slightly higher than expected, but not good. Northwestern picked 16th, finished 16th. Nailed it. Indiana picked 17th, finished 3rd. So, and like Kurt Signetti was ready to tear people in half at Big Ten Media Days because of this ranking, and he could not have been more right.
I can't wait for what he says next year in Indianapolis. I'm assuming it'll be in Indianapolis again when he gets up to the podium and reminds everyone that they were picked to finish 17th and finish 3rd.
Yeah. And then Purdue, I was like, oh, Purdue's picked way too low. Oh, my God. They were the 18th out of 18 that a team has ever been. My God, they were last. They were as last. They won their first game against an FCS team and lost 11 straight.
Yeah. We had Ryan Walters on. You guys were talking about getting picked last and the motivation that was going to be and how disrespectful it was to the Boilermakers. And it was exactly right. Because I think it might have been wrong because I don't know if people who picked them last thought they were going to go winless in the Big Ten. It was like, oh, they might go 2-7 and finish last. Nope.
That's right.
0-9.
Purdue was picked last and they were worse than people thought they would be. That is hard to do. I think it was like Kurt Signetti and Ryan Walters were both standing there. And it's like, hey, do you guys want to have one of these guys on to talk about how their team is underrated? And I was like, yeah, I'll take Walters. Tell Signetti to hit the bricks. We really want to lean into Purdue's going to surprise people. Wow. Why do people watch this show? Ah, what a whiff. So anyway, I think it's worth revisiting. You can't do preseason picks and then just ignore them at the end of the year. You got to call yourself out. So there's a history of the poll that we run like being bad at this, because usually it's the default is pick Ohio State to win it. And it's like Ohio State doesn't win it. And sometimes it's like, oh, now I'm going to doubt Ohio State, then Ohio State wins it. But this year, for the Big Ten championship game, actually picking who would win, 27 people picked Ohio State to win it, and 6 picked Oregon. And Ohio State's not going to win it. So 24 people picked Ohio State over Oregon, 6 picked Oregon over Ohio State, 2 picked Ohio State over Penn State, and 1 picked Ohio State over Michigan. Bill, do you remember what you picked? I remember what I picked.
I picked Ohio State over Oregon.
I picked Ohio State over Penn State. So but that's not a win because Penn State only got in. Like Oregon was the most in team, and I picked them not to make it. I thought like what Ohio State the season Ohio State wound up having is what I thought Oregon would have, right? Like very good, but a loss you don't see coming and just miss it. And then there's some tiebreaker stuff or whatever. And so, but nobody picked Oregon versus Penn State, which would have been a super interesting pick in the preseason if somebody would have made it. I would like to cram this up the cram holes of our poll. How many Big Ten teams will make the playoffs? 64% of the voters said 3. 30% of the voters said 4. 6% said 2. Only 30% of our own conference media believed 4 could get in, Bill.
They didn't watch enough KOTN by that point.
We have SEC honks in our own conference. We got to dehonkify. You got to look inside first.
We do.
Right? It's like police corruption. It's like inside. We got to clean up our own house, which is why, right? I was on with our good buddy John Steppe, who covers Iowa, and I was on his show like in week 4, and he was talking about Jackson Dart for the Heisman, and I verbally punched him in the armpit. You can't be doing this crap.
You want to be the internal affairs of the Big Ten media contingent?
Yeah. You gotta dehonkify your own house before you can go out in the world.
Yeah.
So I refuse. You cannot cover a Big Ten team and spew Jackson Dart stuff at us. We will not tolerate it. And by the way, when I saw him at the Iowa-Nebraska game, I brought it up again so that he knows. He knows. So hopefully next year.
I picked Jalen Milroe to win the Heisman.
Okay. At least my whiffs were the greatest whiffs in Heisman history, but at least I didn't. Well, I picked an SEC guy too. I don't have any room to talk. I literally had the worst pick in the history of Heisman picks. Benched in week 5, Heisman winner. We're not going to say who it was on the show, though. So anyway, the Big Ten's going to get in 4 teams, and only 30% of our voters thought that they could get people in. We also did preseason players of the year. The top 3 in preseason offensive player of the year for the Big Ten: Dylan Gabriel, Oregon quarterback; Quinshon Judkins, Ohio State running back; Emeka Ibuka, Ohio State receiver. I guess, have they announced this, Bill? Did Dylan Gabriel win?
Dylan Gabriel did win, yes.
He did win. So good job by us. This was an obvious pick, but also, I don't know, it doesn't mean you don't get credit for it.
Yeah, this might have been what I picked in the preseason, because I was very high on Quinshon Judkins is going to have 30 rushing touchdowns this year.
Yeah.
And that didn't happen. That's not what I voted. I voted for Big Ten awards this year. I actually voted for Caleb Johnson.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. My top 3 were Caleb Johnson, Dylan Gabriel, and Ty Warren, I think. Or maybe I might have had Johnson, Warren, Gabriel.
Oh, Ty Warren is a very compelling case.
Yeah.
I'm a little surprised you didn't vote for Ty Warren.
I'm pretty sure I voted for Johnson, and then Warren second and Gabriel third.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we had Caleb, it would have been great to have Ty Warren or Caleb Johnson on our preseason list. That would have been in the future. Our preseason defensive player of the year picks: 1, Will Johnson, and the injury just wiped out the possibility of that for the Michigan corner. 2, Caleb Downs from Ohio State, and 3, Mason Graham from Michigan. Has this been announced?
Yes. Abdul Carter won.
Abdul Carter won, who you said would lead the nation in sacks and didn't, but you were in the right ballpark. Like I'll give you, you thought he'd have an awesome year, and he did.
So he finished the year with 10 sacks. He's tied for 11th in the country. But it was a good year. He led the Big Ten in tackles for loss. He really turned it on, I thought, in the second half of the season. I think he's a deserving winner. I didn't vote for him either, I don't think. For postseason, for the actual award itself. I'm pretty sure I voted Mikal Kamara number 1 from Indiana.
Wow. Okay.
And then I also voted for Caleb Downs and Mason Graham. But there were a lot of, I honestly think, I think Downs could have won. I think Graham could have won. I think Carter could have won. I think Kamara could have won. Carson Schweschinger, who's a Butkus Award finalist linebacker at UCLA, I think could have won. He led the Big Ten in tackles. Jay Higgins could have won. Mateo Uiagalelei could have won. There were a lot of really good defensive performances this year.
Okay. I think I'm pretty sure I voted in our poll Kyle Monangai as my number 1 preseason offensive player of the year. He was first team running back in the Big Ten, right? I think I saw that. released from Rutgers. And then I think I voted Jay Higgins preseason off defensive player of the year on my ballot. And he's still a good player. This is, I think, Downs and Graham, right? Definitely in this mix. And then the Johnson injury just took him out of it otherwise.
Yeah.
But
do you want to run through what the Big
picks.
Ten awards were real quick?
Yeah, why don't we wrap up the show with this? And again, we'll make sure we're going to do our Northern All North team at some point, and we're gonna award our own King of the North, the Northern Heisman. So we're not done with talking about who wins awards, but since they're being released here on Tuesday, go ahead and run through them.
Yeah, this is just in the order that the Big Ten tweeted them out. So, Offensive Player of the Year is Dylan Gabriel. Quarterback of the Year is Dylan Gabriel. Freshman of the Year is Jeremiah Smith. Receiver of the Year is Jeremiah Smith.
Okay.
Offensive Lineman of the Year was Ariante Ursary from Minnesota.
Yep.
Defensive Lineman of the Year was Abdul Carter. Defensive Player of the Year was Abdul Carter. Linebacker of the Year was Jay Higgins from Iowa.
Yep.
Defensive Back of the Year was Caleb Downs from Ohio State. The coach and media vote for Coach of the Year both went to Kurt Signetti.
Yep.
Tight end of the year, obviously Tyler Warren. Caleb Johnson, running back of the year from Iowa. Dominic Zavada is the kicker of the year from Michigan. And punter of the year is, I'm going to butcher the last name, I think it's Zaplicki. Eddie Zaplicki from USC was the punter of the year. Caden Weechin from Iowa was, was the returner of the year.
Good.
And that's all.
Yeah, he had a big return that helped set up. He really mattered.
Really
he flipped the field in that Iowa Nebraska game. All deserving winners. That's a good list. I don't know. I mean, like but also like there are a lot of Big Ten guys like you. It was like Common On guy's great. It wasn't hard to vote. It's like, yeah, Caleb Johnson's got to be the running back of the year. Ty Warren's the tight end of the year. I guess people might argue with the numbers that Ty Felton put up, right? Jeremiah Smith is the receiver of the year. You certainly could at least have a discussion there, right?
Yeah, there's like, if you want to have the volume discussion, for sure. Jeremiah was good. Like he ranked well among. He was like fourth in receiving yards per game. He was tied for the lead in touchdowns. Like he had the numbers for it. I would love to know what the voting was for Defensive Player of the Year, because that to me was like pretty competitive. But otherwise, I think everything else was pretty straightforward.
Yeah. Okay. All right, that'll do it for this edition of Kings of the North. We always appreciate Dan Wetzel stopping by every Tuesday. We're really going to preview games, Landis, on Wednesday and Thursday. We're going to give you a big game breakdown on the Big 12 title game between Iowa State and Arizona State. We're going to give you a big game breakdown on the Big 10 title game between Penn State and Oregon. We also are going to make sure we delve into that Boise State UNLV matchup in the Mountain West title game. Boise State is of the North. We want to make sure we care about that. It really matters for the playoff. And we want to give you a good look at the MAC championship game. So we will delve into that as well. And then we're not going to completely ignore. We're going to at least touch on and pick, of course, the SEC championship game, the ACC championship game. We'll have Whatcha on Wednesday, but mostly, Bill, Wednesday and Thursday will be a lot of game talk, a lot of game previews, and also on Wednesday, as stuff is popping on National Signing Day, we will check in on that. But we wanted to do more of a preview than a reaction to it because, again, as we said with the top 300 players nationally, it's like top 300 guys, like 283 are committed already or whatever it is.
Yeah, there'll be some flips. There'll definitely be some flips.
And
some exciting stuff. But yeah, a lot of the guys are already committed.
Yeah. Okay. That'll do it for this edition of KOTN. Always thank our producer, Mike Urostowski. He makes all those cool graphics. I love when we have a graphic and it has like a guy's head and a logo. That's just like the height of like, I never thought I'd be on a show where we had a graphic with a head and a logo on it. Like that's, and I'm not even like, I'm being real like that. Yeah. That really makes me feel like we're really doing something here. So Mike always does that for us. We really appreciate that. There's a lot of work. And sometimes, I'm saying things like, hey, I'll make sure I get you those graphics by this day. And then it's like the next day and it's like, oh, I didn't get you those graphics yet. So Mike does a great job. And we appreciate you guys. We're nothing without you. We hope you're having fun. It was a tremendous, tremendous regular season of college football, and the playoffs are going to be awesome too. We're, of course, going to get into bowls and all that kind of stuff. We're going to wrap up the season and give performance reviews for all 28 of our Northern teams. But, like, I was just, like, mapping some stuff out, Landis. Like, the playoffs going to be here before you know it.
2 weeks. It's not that long. It's not that long of a time.
Like, I'm still a little bit, like, again, I, like, covering that Ohio State, Florida national championship game in 2006 where Ohio State had a month and a half off between. There was no Big Ten championship game, and I think whatever it was, I think it was 46 days, right? Like it's just insane. And it's like, no, there's not a month and a half off between games anymore. There's like,
we're gonna get conference championship weekend, Army Navy, and then the following weekend it's playoff time. There's no lull.
Here we go. Yeah. So stick with us. Tell a friend. Jump on board for now. He's Bill Landis. I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Kings of the North.